Hello, I'm Rosario Marin, former Treasurer of the United States in the administration of President George W. Bush. I am delighted to welcome all of you to our panel entitled Character Counts. But before I do that, I would like to thank the team at the Convention on Founding Principles for inviting our group, 43 alumni for Biden, to be present in this momentous occasion. Our group represents countless of men and women who worked for President Bush. They were either volunteers, worked in his campaigns, or worked at the RNC at that time. With me are three high-ranking individuals of the administration. And like all of us in our group, are very concerned about what is happening, not only to the Republican Party, but more importantly to our nation under the failed leadership of the current president. Each of us serve our nation alongside an honorable man, a man of integrity, and a man of commitment to our country, not to himself. So we have seen in horror how this White House has deteriorated. There is no longer a sense of country first, no commitment to the values that have shaped this country, and sadly, no respect for the institutions that have served as a beacon of hope for the world. That is why we have come together to shine a bright light on the hope that things can be different if we elect someone who can restore those characteristics, especially at the time when the soul of our nation is at stake. Our nation needs a president who is an honorable man, who is devoted to public service, and who has the integrity to require who has the integrity required to lead, heal, and unite our nation through these most difficult times. So it is fitting that we will hear from three remarkable people whose background, experience, and knowledge before, during, and after their service for our country can clearly articulate why character counts. First of all, let me introduce Jimmy Gurulé, former Undersecretary of the U.S. Department of Treasury, where he played a central role in developing and implementing the government's counter-terrorist financing strategy. He currently serves as a law professor of Notre Dame's Law School, where he specializes in national security law and international criminal law. Jimmy, can you please share with us how working for President Bush was emblematic of character counts?
Yes. Well, first of all, Rosario, it's a pleasure to see you. It's a pleasure to reconnect with you, and a pleasure to be here on this panel. Let me take just a couple of minutes to talk about character in the context of foreign affairs. Perhaps character is most important in the field of foreign affairs. As we know, the president is the sole organ of the nation in the field of foreign affairs. The judiciary affords the president substantial deference in matters dealing with foreign relations, and Congress plays a very limited role in this field as well. Basically, the president operates largely unimpeded by the other two branches of government when operating on the diplomatic stage. And I think one very important principle that's necessary to advance U.S. government interest, it's very basic and fundamental, and that's treating other countries with respect. Not only is it the right thing to do, but insulting foreign countries, insulting ethnic groups damages our reputation abroad and undermines U.S. political, economic, and national security interests. So let me give you an example of what I'm referring to. 5 days after the September 11th terrorist attacks, President Bush declared that the U.S. was engaged in a, quote, global war on terrorism, end quote. Concerned about how that phrase might be construed by the international community, the next day, and again, this is 6 days now after the 9/11 attacks, where the U.S. is still trying to determine if there are other terror plots that could result in the killing of innocent civilians. 6 days after the 9/11 attacks, President Bush visited a mosque in Washington, D.C., where he met with religious leaders and declared that the U.S. was not at war with Muslims or Islam, but only against al-Qaeda and those countries providing material support to al-Qaeda. President Bush publicly condemned indiscriminate attacks against innocent American citizens that were Muslims. He stated that innocent Muslims should not be punished. He also defended the Islamic faith. President Bush, on the other hand, did not impose a Muslim ban, excluding Muslims from countries with large Muslim populations from entering the United States, as President Trump had done shortly after assuming office. President Bush did not insult Muslims seeking to enter the United States by calling them criminals, drug dealers, and rapists, the words used by President Bush to describe thousands of Mexican immigrants. The approach taken by President Bush demonstrated moral courage and upheld the values of our country. This latter approach was counterproductive. The approach by President Trump was counterproductive and has damaged the U.S.'s standing in the international community. In short, character counts in foreign affairs, and the next president of the United States must act consistent with moral values when operating on the world stage, and I'm very confident that Vice President Biden will do exactly that.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jimmy. I appreciate it very much. Next is Ambassador Frank Lavin, Undersecretary at the U.S. Department of Commerce and lead trade negotiator for both China and India. And previously, he was ambassador to Singapore. Since 2010, he is the CEO and founder of Export Now, a U.S. firm that operates e-commerce stores in China for international brands. Frank, would you be so kind to share with us how in your positions character counts?
Thank you, Rosario. Thank you for doing this, and happy to offer some thoughts today. What's striking to me about where we are currently in trade is how different the current administration is with historical patterns, not just George W. Bush's approach to trade, but really the kind of approach to trade that characterized all the presidents and all the administrations in the modern era since the 1940s, the present, through the GATT and WTO process. And let me give you two examples about what a sharp difference we've seen today. One is managed trade. Historically, every president, from Harry Truman through George W. Bush, said what we want is that level playing field. We want market economics to work. We want buyers and sellers to meet and be able to offer their goods and make their purchases as the market determines. We've never sought or insisted on any specific target or dollar amount because that contravenes market policies. This is the first administration that's made managed trade an insistent that other countries purchase given set amounts of product a centerpiece of their policy. So it's a step away from free market. It's a step away from rational economics and into mercantilism, and is really not the direction we want to go. Similarly, another break with tradition is all other U.S. presidents in the modern era worked to reduce tariffs, worked to take cost out of the equation, and would only use the introduction of tariffs very sparingly. Sometimes it's necessary to provide a jolt or a nudge or an incentive to get a better outcome, but it's a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. This is the first presidency in the modern era in the last 80 years that seeks tariffs as an end in itself. And what's happened is we've imposed a set of tariffs on trading partners. Instead of making trade a win-win solution, we made trade a lose-lose solution. And here's the irony of this. As you know, Rosario, I do most of my work in China. Here's the irony of this. Even if the administration, even if Donald Trump gets everything he's seeking in the current round of trade negotiations, these phase one, the benefit to the U.S. economy will not exceed the cost of those tariffs. So it's been a real step backwards and very unfortunate for U.S. economic leadership. Thank you. Thank you.
And last but not least is Ambassador James Glassman, former Undersecretary of the U.S. Department of State, where he led government-wide global strategic communications effort. Prior to that, he was chairman of the U.S. Broadcasting Board of Governors. But after the positions at the White House, he was the founding executive director of the George W. Bush Institute. Currently, he's the chairman of Glassman Enterprises, a public affairs consulting firm whose clients include several Fortune 100 companies. Jimmy, please share with us why elect a person of high moral character.
Well, thanks. Critical. Thank you, Rosario. And I definitely want to associate myself with Jimmy's remarks and Frank's remarks. Let me just say really quickly, just a little anecdote involving President Bush. One day I said to him, you know, thank you, President Bush, for allowing me to serve you. And he actually got kind of angry at me. He said, you don't serve me, you serve the American people. And I think that's one of the signs, one of the best expressions I've ever heard of character. Now, you know, there are lots of definitions of character. I want to focus on one area, which is integrity. And maybe those terms are interchangeable. But I'm the co-founder of a small group called Making Integrity Great Again that is trying to make integrity an important voting issue for Americans. Americans have gotten very jaded about the notion of bringing integrity back into our country. They know that it's gone, or that it certainly is leaving. Incredibly enough, 75% of Americans believe that corruption is widespread. That compares to 38% of Germans and 13% of Swedes. And we have a real problem in this country of people who are alienated from government. And that is not a good thing, especially at a time like this when we need people to pull together. One of my favorite quotes about integrity comes from Warren Buffett, probably the greatest investor of our time. He said, in looking for people to hire, you look for three qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they don't have the first, the other two will kill you. And that may well be where we are right now with the White House. So let me define integrity, because I think it means a lot of things to different people. As far as I'm concerned, as far as my own definition of integrity, it has three elements. The first is honesty, the always telling the truth. The second is a strict avoidance of conflict of interest. And the third is respect for the rule of law. So I just want to go to the first, honesty, which is something that is very much lacking today in the White House. My job at the State Department was public diplomacy, and that really amounts to telling America's story, promoting America's interests among foreign publics. And I can tell you that unless people think that you're honest, that you're telling the truth, you're not going to get anywhere with them. And one of the problems we have today abroad is that even our very best friends don't believe us. And integrity really needs to be brought back into public life in America. And it begins at the top. If there's a lack of integrity when it comes to the presidency, there will be a lack of integrity all the way through the government. So I'm very happy to be here today talking about character and integrity and the contrast really between President George W. Bush and the current occupant of the White House.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. And I know for a fact that we all serve under circumstances that were very, very difficult, clearly, as Jimmy mentioned, and all of us were aware of 9/11. I do want to share one thing with all of you, and that is soon after that, the president called a few, maybe 100, maybe a little bit more than that, of his people to the White House. And he talked about, at that moment, how he felt that each and every one of us was being called to serve our nation in its greatest hour of need. I remember feeling so happy and overwhelmed. The reality is, in fact, America was facing very, very difficult times. And all of us were chosen to lead this nation at its greatest need, at the hour of its greatest need. And somehow I feel today we are called again to do the same thing, to raise our voices, to do the best that we can from our own places, whatever it is that we're doing. Our nation is calling out for our help, for our commitment, for our service. And so why? Because character counts. And right now, we must be that beacon of light and beacon of hope. And it is up to us. And so with that, please let me have a round again with Jimmy and the other ambassadors to talk a little bit more about this. This is a time where character must count, integrity, honesty. And so, Jimmy, can you share a little bit more about your feelings about why that is important?
I'd actually like to take off on a point that Jim was making, and that involves character and the rule of law. So over the last approximately 3.5 years, it's been readily apparent that our democracy is fragile and not guaranteed. The cornerstone of our democracy is the rule of law. The fundamental characteristics of the rule of law include equal justice under the law. No one is above the law, including the President of the United States, and the impartial administration of justice free from political pressure and interference. Under Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, the President, quote, shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed, faithfully. As such, the President has a constitutional duty to uphold the rule of law, to be faithful to the rule of law. Preservation of the rule of law requires a president who is a person of integrity and committed to upholding, defending, and promoting this sacred principle, the rule of law. And I agree with Jim, the core of integrity is truthfulness. And sadly today, we have a president who's at war with the truth virtually every day of his administration. The rule of law has been under constant attack during the last 3.5 years by the person who has taken an oath to defend the Constitution. The constant assault on the rule of law threatens our democracy. Moreover, and this is what I fear, 4 more years of abuse of the rule of law could cause irreparable damage to our democracy. While I do not mean to be an alarmist, what is at stake during the upcoming presidential election is the preservation of democracy as we know it, a democracy based on the rule of law. And therefore, it's so important that we elect a president who's faithful to his constitutional duty, to faithfully execute the law, and who's faithful to the rule of law.
Excellent. Thank you, Jimmy. Ambassador Levin. Tell
Thank
us a little bit about
Yeah.
Go ahead, share with us.
Thank you, Rosario. And look, I think Jimmy and Jim both just made some terrific points, and they feed in directly with what I've seen. I do most of my work overseas, and what's fascinating to me in everyday conversations with folks, how hungry they are for U.S. connectivity. That the United States is typically the preferred partner for most folks overseas, and that means in terms of business. That means in terms of holidays, in terms of where they want their kids educated, in terms of their own cultural appetite, the movies they want to watch or the sports teams they follow. So they want that U.S. connectivity, and there's enormous respect for the United States in general. But we've seen that deteriorate in the last few years, and it ties very much into what Jim's been saying and what Jimmy's original point was. Jim's comment on honesty is spot on. Honesty is not just the best policy, but it's also a sign of a professional, mature relationship. That's somebody you respect, you're honest with, and you can talk openly about shortcomings and challenges as well as opportunities and good news. And you typically get that from Americans, and that's a strength of our society. And Jimmy's spot on too, that if you don't begin the conversation with a degree of respect for the other person's culture and tradition and language and habits, there's no reason that person should respect you. And what's really sad and at times painful for me as an American is to see how the current administration uses as its primary international management tool, it uses friction. It uses negative comments, negative approaches, grievances, what it doesn't like. I said, all right, that can be part of anybody's approach, but it shouldn't be the exclusive or even the dominant approach. And trying to navigate internationally by using friction or using negative comments is like trying to drive your car by only using your horn. And to say you've got to find a way to lay off your horn and make friends with people around the world rather than create ill will. So I would say Trump is a master pianist, but there's only one note on his piano, and it's a negative note. And that's all he can do is hit that note. And after a while, it is fatiguing, and it costs the U.S. internationally. We don't have that reservoir of goodwill and that connectivity that we historically have had. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we see that. We see it here domestically, but you're out there. You're out there in throughout the world. And I was sharing with some people that last year I was very fortunate to travel to 20 countries.
Wow.
For different reasons. Not one individual, not one in the 20 countries, all kinds of different languages, that say what a great president you have. It was always this look, this, how did you get that guy? How did you do this? Why did you do this? And it was almost embarrassing, but that's the way it is. And this is just another sign that we had lost that leadership position we had in the world. So in that regard, James, if you can share a little bit more with us, how do you see having more integrity, more honesty? How can we get that in the next administration, should it not be the current one?
Well, I think Rosario starts at the top. You can't really say much more than that. I think that it's important for Americans not to despair and to understand that we can restore the kind of culture in government that we had before. I mean, I unfortunately, I agree with what Jimmy said about democracy being fragile. It's hard to believe that that Americans are now feeling that way. It's hard to believe that we felt that way many times since the Civil War. We really didn't. I mean, this is something brand new. Let me just say one thing about respect, the word that Frank used, and this sounds very small, but it's something that always impressed me about President Bush. I didn't spend a lot of time with President Bush when I was at the State Department, but I certainly did afterwards when I was helping him with the Bush Library. And every meeting that he had, that he called, he was smack on time. Meetings started right on time. And that is a gesture of respect for the time of the people who are involved. And of course, we respected the president's time, no doubt, but he respected our time. Let me make one last comment about character. And I hope this doesn't sound too self-serving for the people who are participating in this terrific event. But, it does take something. It does take some character to stand up as someone who has been a member of a Republican administration, or many Republican administrations in the case of Frank, and say, we're not voting for a Republican this time. We're not supporting a Republican this time. We are supporting a Democrat. We're supporting somebody that we need to restore the country or shore up this democracy that we are in danger, frankly, of losing. So that requires some character. And I think the people who are watching this should understand that there are times when you have to stand up. And this is one of those times.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. I know just to wrap it up, I think it's very important that we all say, why have we taken this position? And I know we've had the opportunity to state it previously, but I think it really comes to the point where we have to say, no more. This is not right. And just taking that, James, from you, I know it's difficult. I know it's been difficult for me to take a stand, but if we have to put country over party, and as difficult as it is, I think we should invite as many Republicans as possible, certainly independents, to join in this. The stakes are high. So, Jimmy, why? Why now?
Oh, no, I agree. I'm just saddened by what I've seen over the last 3.5 years. And maybe even more than saddened, shocked as to what's happening to our country, and is beginning to become a country that I don't recognize. It's not the country that I believe. It's not a country that is living up to its high ideals and values. We're better than this. We're better than this as a country, and we cannot stand by. We cannot be silent and let this continue with our country. We've got to step forward and take action to turn this around, and we can do it.
Thank you, Jimmy. Frank?
Rosario, I think one set of issues which sadly summarized the deficiencies of the current administration. A very vivid and unfortunately very human level was the response to coronavirus. That what we saw for several months was a president who was in denial, was almost angry about the problem as if he was being personally attacked, gave conflicting advice, gave advice that was contradicted medical professionals, did not allow the United States to undertake some kind of national coordinated social distancing policy. And we lost months and months and months of time there because the president refused to rise to a normal level of management. So there was not the integrity that Jim referred to earlier. There was not sort of internal respect for expertise in the process that Jimmy referred to. And we were left with a very haphazard set of activity decisions that worked to the detriment of the health of the entire nation. We are still trying to climb out from under the consequences of the failed several months of absence of leadership. But that dramatized to me in a very painful, very human way to say we just need a new president, someone who takes management seriously, someone who takes leadership seriously, someone who doesn't run or deny bad news, but rises to the moment. So we do. Donald Trump should not be president.
Thank you, Frank. James, last words.
Yeah, and I think, Frank, that's where we start. Let's remove Donald Trump from office. There are many policy differences that those of us who served in Republican administrations have with Joe Biden, and we'll hash those out when he's president. But we're never going to get anywhere in this country. We're never going to even be able to have conversations unless Donald Trump leaves office. So that's tremendously important. And I just want to go back to the issue of honesty. Thomas Jefferson said, the art of government consists in the art of being honest. If you're not honest, if you're not telling the truth, people are not going to follow you. You're not going to be able to persuade them to do what's right. And I think that's one of the problems we have right now in the coronavirus time. President Trump not only has made a lot of mistakes, but gosh, whatever even if he were to say things that are constructive, I don't think Americans would believe him. Very recently, I think the administration, we'll see how it plays out, but did a good thing in bringing Israel and UAE together to eventually, we expect, have diplomatic relations and exchange ambassadors. We'll see how that plays out. But a lot of people are dubious because when you consistently tell lies, even if the truth is important and good, they're not going to believe you. So I think we've now burned that bridge at this point with this administration, that it has lost all credibility, and it's time for a change.
Thank you, James. And just to wrap this up, thank you so very much to our three very exemplary individuals. I thank you so very much. And for people that are listening, vote. Come November, vote for a change. We deserve that. Our nation is. Thank you so much.